Come, let us explore the possibility that you're not lazy, but rather disabled. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. The question begins, my awareness closes when I face discomforts. What practice should I do to be more accepting of my physical and mental states? Whenever I face a niggle after a... Oopsie. Let's go back and hit this real quick. And let's hit page layout. And hit OK. That doesn't look quite kosher, does it? Okay, let's go back and try again. Whenever I face a niggle after an intense workout, or have a headache or a common cold, I feel it is too much discomfort, which I try to avoid. If you have chosen to meditate, but you feel that your physical maladies are keeping you from meditation, and if that bothers you, that's not laziness. That's a symptom of something else. If seemingly inconsequential things physically feel intolerable, that is a symptom of something else. Not all disabilities are obvious to the untrained eye. Not all disabilities are as obvious as being an amputee or being blind or being wheelchair bound or being hospital bed bound. But that by definition does not stop them from being disabilities if they inhibit your ability to function as an independent adult in our society. There are many subtle disabilities that are very, very real, that are physiogenic in origin, that have the same results. But because they can be very subtle to the untrained eye, they can go undiagnosed. In the disability community, there's the term spoons. What if you only had X number of units of energy or spoons a day? Well, to do a normal morning routine might take someone 1 spoon, but if someone has slogging through the swamp of disabilities, it might take all their spoons, and then they have no spoons for anything else. It's not that they're lazy, it's that they've spent their energy quota for the day. That energy quota does not just affect our physique, it affects our central nervous system, our mind, our logic, our emotions. All those things require an energy budget, and if we are in energy deficit, we do not have the energy for that. Let us continue. I make my awareness so small and try to rest in a zone. And despite the lies of late-stage capitalism, that is not wrong and that is not bad. There is a famous Zen quote, which I'm going to paraphrase. When you are hungry, eat. When you are weary, rest. The truly enlightened have no problem with the meeting of physical needs. It's only the foolish, the minions of pseudo-spiritual patriarchy, that have a problem with that. Let's continue. I treat these sensations with aversion and try to get rid of them. Is that bad? If you accidentally touch a stove, should you leave it there? If your body exercises the reflex arc and your hand retracts from the open flame faster than thought itself, is that a spiritual failing? Is it more spiritual to let your hand cook and just to watch? Is that what the Buddha thinks is wise? Our minds live in a body. That body has evolved over a vast ocean of time to survive. Our primary survival drives, can be thought of in two, but there's a whole bunch of them. Simply put, we are wired to flee from that which undermines the ability to procreate or live long enough to procreate, and chase after that which supports procreating or living long enough to procreate. That is our fundamental wiring. That is the demand of our genes. This is the fundamental wiring upon which the entire central nervous system is built. It is not our job to lobotomize our brainstem with a hacksaw and an ice cream scooper. It is our job to make peace with our instincts. How do we do that? Our body can treat our instincts in one of two ways: as a tool or a tyrant. The Buddhist path is to relegate our instincts to the role of tool. That's all. We evolved pain receptors, not because some capricious, real or imagined entity in the sky wanted to torture us, but as a survival mechanism. Pain and pleasures are fundamental navigation devices for in the distant past, when complex life forms such as us did not have language, but we could viscerally respond to pleasure or pain. Upon the Buddha's path, let me jump forward for a few minutes here. There is a myth that we are supposed to actively concentrate and actively analyze, but doing so will exhaust our prefrontal cortex and activate our amygdala, the seat of aggression and anxiety. If instead of that, we rely upon our sympathetic nervous system to practice mindfulness, vulnerable, passive, visceral, random, and fleeting, and we rely upon our parasympathetic nervous system to practice meditation, wherein we physically relax and mentally release, some very interesting things will happen. First, our anxious and aggressive amygdala will calm down. Second, our empathetic anterior cingulate gyrus will light up. And third, the more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds will flow from love's centered spontaneity, not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. So it is perfectly appropriate to respond to the physical stressors in our life in a way wherein we experience the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity, which is also known as being in the flow state or the zone. These are very, very positive things. If I'm going for a walk and I offer my hand to a dog to sniff, that I might make friends with it and perhaps pet it, if it bares its teeth and lunges for my face, and I rear back out of its range, that is not a flaw in my spiritual training. That is my survival instinct protecting the organism housing this brain, which is appropriate, which is totally appropriate. Let's go back to the original series of questions. These have much impact on my moods and my way of life. So our moods are going to fluctuate. The first enlightenment factor is mindfulness, which infers there's something to notice. We have evolved to notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, as well as emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. The first fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is right view, which is just a fancy way of saying a healthy perspective of impermanence, not one based on logic, not one based on blind faith, one that is based upon mindfulness. When practicing mindfulness, we cannot help but notice change, sometimes subtle, other times jarring. We cannot help but notice change to the sights we see, the sounds we hear, the sensations we feel, the flavors we taste, the scents we smell. These are always changing all the time, and we are wired to perceive those changes. And according to the Buddha, that is spiritually advantageous. That also applies to our emotions, our intentions, our thoughts, our memories, and our imaginings. They are in a perpetual state of flux, shifting wildly from the painful to the pleasurable, from the boring to the interesting, from the grotesque to the glorious. All these things are in a constant state of flux. The Buddha never condemned anyone for noticing change. In fact, he lauded them, because noticing the inevitability of change helps us to practice the physical relaxation and mental release that uses as a carrier wave exhalation. Every time we exhale, there's a subtle release, a subtle letting go. And it is our resistance to letting go, our resistance to breath itself is folly. So having our emotions change is not an indictment. Now I gotta back up. I guess I gotta go forward here. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but no, not in the fun, tingly way. So what does it look like when 90% of humanity, including 90% of meditation teachers, suck? It looks like yang. It looks like patriarchy. It looks like people thinking that being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel is pretty awesome. Forget the fact that, the Buddha said it's far better to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. These people know better than the Buddha, or so they think, and they want to be this way. These are the people who will scold you for having emotions or having intentions or having thoughts. And these people are not helpful. They're not helpful to themselves, and they are not helpful to others. You don't have to worry about who people are. You can give everyone the benefit of the doubt. But when they show you who they are, accept that. When someone says, hey man, I'm rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, and so should you be. Thank them for their time and then run away. For these people are not helpful. They are destructive. Similarly, Our job is not to undermine our mindfulness. Mindfulness is the seventh fold of the eightfold path and the first of the seven enlightenment factors. Buddha thought it was pretty important, and don't listen to anybody who contradicts the Buddha. So, a mindset goes back to analysis or thinking in a certain way or self-talk, and that's just a form of concentration and analysis, which we've already proven stimulates the amygdala, increases our anxiety and aggression, and shoves us further down the downward spiral of being rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. And nobody wants that. So there are some things you can do. If you want to tolerate the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune, might I suggest lifestyle therapies? Really radical things like getting enough sleep, especially the sleep you get before 12, is said to be the most important. Getting enough fresh air, sunshine, exercise, getting enough clean water, fresh fruit, vegetables, seeds, nuts, legumes, funguses, and the like. Eat as a whole food vegan diet. It's been shown by the World Health Organization to be optimal for all genders and all humans of all stages of development. It can be done on a budget. If you can only shop at the dollar store, you can still buy fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, legumes, and grains. I know I did for many years. It's totally doable. And there's some wonderful resources on YouTube to help you through that. These things are incredibly important. These things will improve your tolerance, but so is rest. Remember, said Master Basho, I'm probably mispronouncing his name. When you're hungry, eat. When you're thirsty, drink. When you're weary, rest. There's nothing spiritual or wise about asceticism. Remember, the Buddha forsook asceticism prior to attaining full enlightenment. Let us continue. Body scanning certainly causes a sort of numbing effect, but I do not consider it as acceptance. And numbing is the opposite of mindfulness, isn't it? So what does acceptance mean? Let's just pretend you burn your hand on the stove. And so what is the mature, accepting thing to do? Allow your body's reflex arc to retract your hand and then apply first aid to your hand. That's all very, very centered and rational. What's an irrational response? To lose your mind, tear down the house, start a riot, and, shoot yourself in the head because you have the anguish of burning yourself with a finger. That's not a balanced response. But when you gotta pee, you don't let your bladder burst. You go find a toilet and you urinate. When it's time to defecate, you don't let your bowels burst. You go find a toilet and you defecate. When it's time to drink water, you don't needlessly die of dehydration. You drink a glass of water. When it's time to eat, you don't starve to death. You eat some food, hopefully some healthy food. Responding to your needs, both physical and emotional, is not a spiritual failing, despite what the boobs in your life have told you. So let's tie this up with a big red bow. The more effectively we practice mindfulness and meditation, remembering that the most efficient way to practice mindfulness is to silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during each inhalation, and that the most effective way of practicing meditation is to silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during each exhalation. Do this at least 5 minutes every 12 hours or so, and before you know it, you will find that your choices, utterance, and deeds are flowing, not from scattered spontaneity and not from contrivance, but instead from centered spontaneity. This is what the Buddha referred to as the effortless effort of the sixth fold of the Buddha's eightfold path. This will contribute greatly to your future peace. There will be no practice this morning, for this body is under the weather and must rest. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.